My name is Brent Ellis, and I've been doing astrophotography for a few years now, pretty much only galaxies and nebulas, and this year I set out to start capturing new things, really with the eclipse in mind, but also planets, the Milky Way, the Moon, and especially starting to image our star, the Sun. So little did I know that what I would see on Thursday, May 9th, would lead to one of the most breathtaking sights I've ever seen with my own eyes. In a fairly short span of time, almost 24 hours, we went from regular old day to unexpected check off in the bucket list, a once in a lifetime, maybe crazy occurrence. On Thursday, I happened to capture an X flare on the sun's surface from a monster sunspot region 3664 that would send matter and solar radiation hurtling toward our planet. And on Friday night, I got to see what that material looked like as it bounced against our atmosphere. For one night, a huge percentage of the world's population got to see with their own eyes and near their own homes a real live aurora, something many, myself included, figuring we would only see something like that on a special trip to the north or to Iceland or something like that. But this was my experience. So, in particular, I've started solar imaging. I use something called a Daystar Quark solar eyepiece that allows me to take these detailed hydrogen alpha images of the sun's surface. I mainly will use an Explore Scientific 127 millimeter refractor, a dedicated ZWO Astro camera, and some other equipment and software. Without specialty equipment like that, you can see the sun in what's called white light, and this allows you to really see sunspots very clearly, but not necessarily the details of the surface, or the popcorn, as my wife likes to call it. So you can see the details of the surface, the wavy patterns of the chromosphere. You can see filaments, you can see prominences coming off the sun surface, especially along the outer edges. And additionally, you can do time-lapse recordings to really see the motion of the sun's surface in action. This includes the activity around sunspots. You can see the motion of the prominences as they rise and fall and swirl. But the big events, if you're lucky enough to catch them, are the solar flares. Now, first, it's important to know a little bit about solar flares. My non-scientific explanation for what they actually are, they're just massive explosions on the sun's surface, and they're measured using a logarithmic scale, so kind of like measuring earthquakes with the seismic Richter scale. So there's different types of flares. There's B class, C class, M class, X class, and they get stronger as you go higher here. So a C flare is about 10 times bigger than a B flare. An M flare is about 10 times bigger than a C flare, and about 100 times stronger than a B flare. An X flare is about 10 times bigger than an M flare, about 100 times larger than a C flare. And once you go to X9, so it moves up B1, B9, C1, C9, M1, M9, X1, X9. Once you go beyond X9, you can actually keep going higher and higher. And in 2003, the largest X flare was measured. It overloaded the sensors, and scientists estimate that it topped about an X45. So this is the largest physically measured with modern equipment. If you want to learn about some cool stuff, though, go look up the Carrington event that occurred in 1859. So X flares typically eject matter and radiation into space, and quite often at Earth. So luckily we have this thing called the atmosphere to keep us safe. But these ejections are called coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, and some big ones are what was sent our way starting on May 9th. All of the flares that led up to our Aurora event were roughly in this patch, from the X1 to X3, maybe up to about X5 for one of them, but typically around X1 to X3. So the flares will generally look like lightning strikes when you're imaging them and doing a time lapse. Back in February of this year, I caught some low M class flares on Sunspot Region 3590. That's about the time I really wanted to learn about more and capture an X flare. So the problem, though, is there's no real way of predicting exactly when they might occur. So there's a lot of luck in waiting when you're doing this imaging, and hopefully you'll get some good stuff. So fast forward to Thursday, May 9th, a nice clear day. In between some meetings, I set up my equipment outside to capture this massive sunspot region, 3664, that had been moving across the sun surface. But it had been cloudy and rainy for the past probably 2 weeks, and I really didn't have any chance at all to image it. So I started out with a nice white light capture, so you can really see the detail of all the sunspots. Around 90 of them in this image alone. And again, many of the larger ones you see here are significantly bigger than the entire planet Earth. So for scale, you can just see how large this region actually is. So then I switched over to hydrogen alpha mode, and right as I did, I saw some fireworks going off, and I knew I was going to be in for something special. So what you can see here, and I'll run this on repeat hopefully, what you'll see here is a massive X1.1 flare explosion. And this happened right as I started my recording. So really the perfect timing, and amazing thing to witness. And you can see the flare and some of those solar materials just shoot up into the sky. And then some of it get reabsorbed back into the solar surface. But what you really can't see is that resulting CME that was sent out our direction. So I was super excited to capture this event. I figured that would be the end of it. And then now I'd wait for another opportunity to try and catch another X flare in the future with another set of sunspots. I did also process just an individual capture of that explosion, just so I had a nice still frame of that. Now fast forward again to the next day, and I started seeing some interesting news posts hitting the internet. Some chatter going on in different astro groups that I monitor, and local members of my Memphis Astronomical Society starting to ask if anybody was going to try and catch the auroras. Now I was super pessimistic that we'd ever be able to see anything like this, especially all the way down where we are outside of Memphis, Tennessee. But in the news reports, the visible lines kept moving further south and further south. I still didn't have a whole lot of hope that anything would happen, but then people in the UK started posting their pictures, and then Europe, and then North Africa, and people in similar latitudes as we went across to the other side of the planet. They were getting some amazing results. So at that point, I knew whether or not it happened, I couldn't miss it. If something was going to happen, I needed to get out to a dark site. So I packed up, I headed out to our Memphis Astro dark site. It's about an hour away from Memphis, just to get away from the city lights with no real expectation of success whatsoever. And at the moment, I don't really have a color camera. I have a mono camera that I use for deep space imaging, but I did just literally upgrade to the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. So I figured if I don't even see Aurora, I can at least try out some of the low light and astro capabilities um, with the camera and see how that works out. So my setup was an S24 Samsung, again, Galaxy Ultra phone. I had a cell phone holder, a ball mount head for my tripod, and this was really all that I was going out with. A lot of people were able to get some really great shots holding their phone or their camera, but the stability of keeping the phone secure on a tripod is a definite bonus. On the phone, there are a few things you can do to optimize your ability to capture the aurora in low light situations. So, what I did, you can use the auto mode, but using that on most cameras would not really be ideal. For the Samsung 24 Ultra, I use the Expert RAW camera app. Um, Now, there's more to it than this, but in general, these settings were good enough to help me achieve what I was able to achieve. And a few of the key areas that would go into any type of nighttime imaging, but especially an aurora if we get an opportunity to do it again. I set my timer delay to about 2 seconds, and this allowed me, because I had to hit the button to take the picture. This allowed the phone and the tripod to settle down before the actual picture was taken. So hopefully I was eliminating any kind of vibration. I set my image quality as high as I could. In this case, I did the 24 meg imaging, but also so that I could achieve the ultra wide angle. I wanted to get as much of the sky as I could in my image, so I wanted to use the ultra wide capability of the phone here. I set my ISO for several images between about 400 and 800. ISO, this is about how much light you're really letting in when you take that picture. The higher the value, usually the noisier your images will be, but you could have potentially gone higher here. And then exposure time, about 1 to 2 seconds was really more than enough. The more time you add, the more blurry it would make the image as the lights were constantly moving. So instead of kind of clear light bands, for example, everything would kind of blur together. And I've got some nice pictures where it was a little more blurry as well. But I found that about 1 second was really more than enough to capture what I wanted to capture on my images. Additionally, I set up my phone to capture both JPEG and RAW. RAW images allow you to take that, load it into a tool like Photoshop, and maybe do some extra processing on a computer afterwards just to get the most quality out of it. The Samsung S24 has some kind of weird quirks with their RAW configuration. There's some videos online that talk about it, but it was good enough for what I was aiming to capture in this situation. Usually the JPEG will get noise reduced and it'll be a little bit fuzzier. So this allowed me to keep more detail in my final images. So let me set the stage here. I, like many others, and I buy into the cliche that Northern Lights are on my bucket list, and with good reason. There are some things that you just can't explain unless you see them with your own eyes. So there we are, standing in the dark, several pals from the Memphis Astronomical Society out there with me. Reports are saying that the show won't really happen until between 1 a.m. and 4. So we're going to try out some other things. Maybe I'll take some star photos. Maybe I'll try out some astro settings on the S24. And as we're setting up, I look north and I say out loud, are my eyes playing tricks, or am I actually seeing something? And we thought it might be clouds, or maybe just part of the sunset lights that are still just fading away. And then my buddy Clay kind of takes a quick snapshot and shouts out, hey guys, there's color in there. And we were off to the races. So about 9 p.m. is when this started. A lot of people missed this, unfortunately, because they were looking for that 1 a.m. start time. but it started with what looked like a faint wall just approaching us from the north. And pretty soon you could actually make this out with your eyes. Now the pictures give it more color than what was really there with your eyes, but you could definitely see these patterns as they were moving across the sky. It was mostly reds with some greens. There were some blues mixed in, maybe some occasional purple, but you could just see these huge swaths of color moving across the sky. And one of the more interesting ones was when you looked overhead, it looked like what appeared to be a white ribbon, or these white ribbon bands just emanating from a particular location. And again, that was directly overhead. I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more scientifically what caused that particular phenomenon, as basically the light hitting our atmosphere at the angle right above our heads was really showing us this pattern. And you could just see those strands of light just waving. To the north, occasional columns of light just kind of danced out. We saw some different colors. I caught some in the purple blue range, a lot of, again, green and pink and red. But for about an hour and a half, the lights just moved and danced and showed us all different kinds of patterns. I kept snapping pictures. I wish I had more time to prepare and come up with a game plan, but while it was happening, I just kept moving my tripod and taking as many pictures as I possibly could. Now, once the main show was over, the sky was just blanketed with almost a solid sheet of red for most of the remainder of the evening. Some clouds came and went. There were a few more pillars of light from time to time, but it never really did pick up and with the same fervor that it did during that first hour and a half. So it was kind of fun, just kind of sitting out there in the dark. The light show died down, but you could just see that red haze just constantly up there. Now, it is important to set some expectations as well, and it may have been different the further north that you go, but the colors, while they were clearly visible in the night sky, were not as vibrant as my pictures show. For example, this may be a pretty decent representation of what that first oncoming wall looked like to my eyes. Probably even darker than this, but the point is you could definitely see the color, you could see the light bands and see this happening. If you were in a city, in a town, if there were a lot of lights around you, this may have been very dull and you may not have been able to see anything outside of what your phone or camera could capture. And then versus what my camera did actually capture. And again, this is very bright. The ISO was up pretty high on this, so I'm a little overexposed in what this image is showing. But you can see all that detail there. You can make out those light pillars a little bit better. Versus what my final product looks like. I kind of dialed back the exposure a little bit, did some final touch up in Photoshop to get it to a more balanced view. But again, you can see what that the colors look like. You can see the greens and the pinks and the whites and how they show against the clouds. So a lot of really cool stuff here. But again, to set the expectation, these bright, vibrant pictures where we were, at least in Tennessee, that's not what you were actually seeing with your own eyes. But again, you could clearly see the different color shades, all the pillars, the light ribbons, everything and going on. Every time I took a picture and I saw the preview, I must have said out loud, I don't believe it 100 times that night. It's amazing how much light and color a simple picture could capture and show us. Now, I did go back the next night. I was hoping for a repeat occurrence, like many others that unfortunately missed it from the night before. But there was no real luck. Right after the sun went down, we could see some slight reds and greens off in the distance, but only on camera. and it quickly dissipated as the visible aurora kind of retreated back into the north. I only caught a slight glimpse of it as I was testing out some of the star trail time lapse features on my Galaxy S24 Ultra phone. So while I was disappointed, I didn't get a twice in a lifetime opportunity 2 nights in a row. I'm still amazed that something 94 million miles away that I happened to capture at the source could have such a profound impact on so many people, including myself. And I look forward to the next time that I get a chance to see these northern lights. Maybe next time actually in the north, maybe again close to home.